My name is Flora Ashford, and I need to tell you about the night I lost my sight. Not because I want sympathy, but because what happened to me could happen to anyone who trusts the wrong person. It was a Sunday evening in October. I was 24 years old, preparing for my Carnegie Hall debut in 3 months, and celebrating being featured on the cover of Classical Music Review. My entire life stretched before me like a symphony waiting to be played. I invited Aunt Diane, my godmother, my mother's best friend since medical school, the woman who'd been there for every birthday and recital, over for dinner to celebrate. She arrived with wine and that warm smile I'd known my whole life. We talked about my late mother, about my upcoming performance, about how proud Mom would have been. She'd be over the moon, Diane said, but something in her voice felt strange. A tightness I couldn't quite identify. After dinner, Diane insisted on making her special chamomile tea, the one she'd made for me since childhood. I drank it, feeling nostalgic and safe. 20 minutes later, my vision started to blur. Then burn. Then disappear into darkness that would become permanent. I woke 3 days later in a hospital bed, completely blind. The diagnosis came from Dr. Sebastian Grant, the ophthalmologist, severe chemical burn to both optic nerves from methanol poisoning. The damage was irreversible. I'm so sorry, Ms. Ashford, Dr. Grant said gently. The optic nerves are too damaged. Your vision won't return. I felt Diane's hand gripping mine. She was crying. Oh, Flora, darling. The wine must have been contaminated. This is my fault. I brought the bottle. I should have checked. But through my shock and terror, something registered. Diane's voice. The way she said my fault didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like satisfaction? No. That couldn't be right. I was traumatized, not thinking clearly. My brother Julian arrived from overseas, devastated. My fiancé Ethan came daily, saying the right things but with increasing strain in his voice. And Diane was there constantly. Helpful. Devoted. Indispensable. The police investigated briefly. Contaminated alcohol, they concluded. Tragic accident. The wine bottle had been thrown away. Diane said she was too distraught to think of preserving evidence. Case closed. My life as I knew it was over. Let me tell you who I was before that night, so you understand what I lost. I graduated from Juilliard at 21 with honors. By 22, I was performing in major concert halls across the country. My mother, Dr. Helena Ashford, a renowned cardiac surgeon, had died of cancer when I was 19, leaving me an $8 million trust fund and her Manhattan penthouse. I had everything: talent, beauty, opportunity, and a future as bright as stage lights. My fiancé Ethan Rivera was a violinist, equally talented, equally ambitious. We were supposed to be a power couple in the classical music world. Diane Winters had been my mother's best friend for 30 years. A doctor herself, though never quite as successful as Mom. She'd been named executor of Mom's estate and my godmother. After Mom died, she became even more present in my life. I trusted her completely. She was family. That trust would cost me everything. The first month was hell. I couldn't navigate my own apartment. Couldn't read music. Couldn't see the piano keys I'd played by sight for 20 years. My Carnegie Hall debut was cancelled. Concert contracts dissolved. My career evaporated overnight. Diane was there constantly, helping me navigate rooms, arranging specialists, handling insurance claims. She moved into the guest room temporarily to help me adjust. You're so brave, she'd tell me. Your mother would be so proud. But I could hear something beneath her words. A lightness. Almost happiness? I told myself I was being paranoid. Grief and trauma were making me suspicious of the one person helping me most. Ethan visited daily at first, but I could hear the strain. The pauses before he spoke. The way he touched me less. 6 weeks after I lost my sight, he ended our engagement. I can't do this, Flora, he said, his voice breaking. This isn't what I signed up for. You're not the person I fell in love with anymore. After he left, I sat in darkness and waited to cry. But the tears wouldn't come. I was too numb. Diane arrived within an hour, as if she'd been waiting for this. Oh sweetheart, I'm so sorry. But honestly, he wasn't worthy of you. You're better off. And there it was again. That satisfaction in her voice. 3 months after losing my sight, Diane sat me down to discuss finances. With your medical expenses and the cancelled performances, we need to be strategic, she explained. I've been reviewing the trust. We should move some assets, make smart investments. She placed papers in front of me, guiding my hand to signature lines. Just standard reorganization. I'm protecting your future, sweetheart. I signed everything she put before me. I couldn't see the documents. Couldn't read the terms. Couldn't understand what I was agreeing to. I trusted her. She was my godmother. My mother's best friend. The executor of Mom's estate. What I didn't know, Diane was embezzling. $50,000 here for medical expenses that didn't exist. $100,000 there for investments that were actually transfers to her offshore accounts. She was stealing from me while I sat in darkness, helpless and trusting. Over 6 months, she would take nearly $2 million. And because I couldn't see to review statements, I had no idea. For months after losing my sight, something changed. I was learning to navigate by sound and touch, and my other senses were sharpening. One afternoon, I was home alone, or thought I was. I heard the front door open. Diane's key in the lock. She didn't call out, didn't announce herself. I stayed silent in my bedroom, listening. I heard her moving through the apartment, opening drawers, rustling papers. Then I heard her voice on the phone. Yes, I'll have another $200,000 transferred by Friday. From the Ashford Trust. She has no idea. The girl literally can't see what I'm doing. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. I sat frozen in darkness, my heart pounding, as the woman I trusted as family discussed stealing from me with casual amusement. After she left, I sat there for hours, my mind racing. The satisfaction in her voice when she talked about my blindness. Her quick arrival after Ethan left. The wine she'd brought that night. A terrible question began to form, one I didn't want to ask but couldn't ignore. What if it wasn't an accident? My brother Julian came home from his overseas assignment 2 weeks later. An investigative journalist, he'd been in Eastern Europe covering war crimes. This was his first extended visit since my blinding. When he walked into the apartment, I heard him stop. Just stop and breathe. Flora, his voice broke. God, Flora. He held me for a long time. Then he asked the questions everyone else had stopped asking. Tell me exactly what happened that night. Every detail. I told him about the dinner, the wine, the tea. About how only I went blind, not Diane. And the wine bottle? Julian asked. Diane threw it away. Said she was too distraught to think of preserving it. That's convenient, Julian said darkly. Flora, methanol poisoning severe enough to cause permanent blindness? The amounts required are very specific. And only affecting one person who drank from the same bottle? The odds are astronomical. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe this wasn't an accident. I told him about the phone call I'd overheard. About Diane's embezzlement. About the strange satisfaction in her voice. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then, let me investigate. Quietly. Don't let Diane know you suspect anything. Julian worked quickly and quietly. Within a week, he'd uncovered disturbing information. First, he traced Diane's financial activities. The embezzlement was real. $1.8 million siphoned from my trust over 6 months through fake medical expenses and fraudulent investments. Second, he found Diane had accessed Mom's medical records from her cancer treatment. Specifically, records about medications and chemical compounds. Third, and most damning, Julian broke into Diane's home office. Technically illegal, but he was desperate. He found her journal. The entries made his blood run cold. Flora's recital tonight. So beautiful, so talented. Just like Helena at that age. It's not fair. Why do they get everything? Helena's dying. Soon I'll be free of her shadow. But Flora will still be here. Still perfect. Still everything I'm not. I can't watch Flora shine while I fade. There has to be a way to stop her. And finally, dated 2 days before I went blind. I've made my decision. For 30 years, I loved Helena and hated myself for envying her. Now I'll hate Flora and love myself for acting. The methanol is prepared. Tomorrow, I free myself from the Ashford shadow forever. Julian photographed every page with shaking hands. Julian brought his evidence to Dr. Grant, my ophthalmologist. Grant examined my medical records with new eyes. The pattern of optic nerve damage, Grant said slowly, is consistent with methanol poisoning. But the concentration would have had to be very precise, enough to destroy the optic nerves without causing death. This wasn't accidental contamination. This was calculated. They brought the evidence to Detective Sarah Walsh, who specialized in financial crimes and attempted murder. We have enough to arrest her, Walsh said. But I want a confession. For your closure. So we planned a trap. One final dinner, 7 months after the night I lost my sight. I would face the woman who destroyed me and make her confess. Before I tell you about that final dinner, you need to understand why Diane did this. Julian's investigation uncovered the 30-year history of toxic friendship between her and my mother. Diane and Mom met in medical school. Both brilliant, both ambitious. But Mom was always just slightly better. Valedictorian by 0.2 points. First pick for the prestigious residency. The one professors remembered. Diane told herself she didn't mind. They were best friends. But she did mind. Every day for 30 years. Mom became a renowned cardiac surgeon, saving hundreds of lives, pioneering techniques. Diane became a successful general practitioner, but always in Mom's shadow. At conferences, people would light up at Mom's name, Dr. Helena Ashford? What an honor. Then politely acknowledge Diane as Dr. Ashford's friend. Mom married my father, a wealthy architect. They had 2 children, lived in a penthouse, had the perfect life. Diane married and divorced in 8 years. No children. No passion. Just emptiness. When Mom got cancer, Diane was there for everything. Everyone praised her devotion. But inside, Diane felt relief. Finally, Helena wouldn't have everything. Then Mom died, and I remained. Beautiful, talented, beloved. Everything Mom had been, but younger. Diane's 30 years of suppressed jealousy turned into pure hatred. And she decided to act. 7 months after losing my sight, I invited Diane to dinner. Just like that Sunday night 7 months ago. Julian and Detective Walsh were hidden in the next room with recording equipment. I'd learned to cook by touch and sound. I prepared the meal with steady hands, then sat across from Diane at the table I could no longer see. Aunt Diane, I said, my voice calm. I wanted to thank you for everything since I lost my sight. Of course, darling, she said warmly. I promised your mother I'd take care of you. Did you? I asked. Is that what you've been doing? Taking care of me? Her voice changed slightly. What do you mean? I mean the $2 million you've stolen from my trust. The money you've been embezzling while I sat here blind and helpless. Silence. Then her chair scraped back. Flora, I don't know what you're talking about. Who's been putting these ideas in your head? I overheard you, I said calmly. 4 months ago. You were on the phone, laughing about how I couldn't see what you were doing. You thought I wasn't home. More silence. Then Diane's voice colder. Even if that were true, you can't prove anything. You're blind, Flora. You can't see documents. Can't testify to what you saw. You can barely manage your own life. You're right, I said. I can't see. But I can hear everything now. Every inflection in your voice. Every lie. Every moment of satisfaction when you talk about my blindness. I leaned forward. Tell me, Aunt Diane, when you made me that chamomile tea the night I went blind, your special recipe, what did you put in it? The silence was deafening. How long have you hated me? I asked softly. How long did you hate my mother? Was it the whole 30 years you called her your best friend? Something broke in Diane. Maybe it was relief at finally being able to speak the truth. Maybe she couldn't stand my calm voice in the darkness. You want to know the truth? Her voice turned vicious. Fine. Yes, I hated your mother. From the moment we met, when everyone looked at her instead of me. When she got everything I wanted, career, family, recognition, love. I stayed silent, letting her continue. And when she died, I thought I'd finally be free. But then there was you. Perfect Flora with your perfect talent and your perfect life. You didn't work for any of it, you just inherited brilliance. And everyone loved you for it. Just like they loved Helena. So you decided to destroy me, I said. I decided to level the playing field, she corrected. You had everything. I took away what mattered most, your vision. Your ability to perform. Your future. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice, and it felt glorious. The methanol was in the tea, wasn't it? Yes. Mixed perfectly to burn out your optic nerves without killing you. Death would have been mercy. I wanted you to live in darkness. To know what you lost. To suffer like I've suffered for 30 years. I reached across the table and pressed a button on my phone. Thank you for that, Aunt Diane. Detective Walsh, did you get all of that? The door opened. Walsh stepped out with Julian and Dr. Grant. Every word, Walsh said. Diane Winters, you're under arrest for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and embezzlement. Diane's sharp intake of breath. Then, surprisingly, she laughed. You think you've won? You're still blind, Flora. You'll be blind forever. I took that from you and nothing will give it back. Every day for the rest of your life, you'll wake in darkness and remember what I did. I stood, facing where I knew she was. You're right. I'll never see again. But you know what I've learned in 7 months of darkness? I don't need eyes to see who people really are. I took a step closer. What I see now is a pathetic woman who spent 30 years hating her best friend instead of building her own life. Who destroyed an innocent person because she couldn't stand her own mediocrity. I tilted my head. Tell me, was it worth it? Because you're still the same miserable person you've always been. The only difference is now everyone else can see it too. 1 year after I lost my sight, Diane stood trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The journal entries, the financial records, the confession recording, Dr. Grant's expert testimony about the precise nature of the methanol poisoning. Diane showed no remorse. During her testimony, she looked directly at me in the courtroom. I'd do it again, she said. Flora Ashford deserved to fall. She had everything handed to her while I worked for scraps. Her blindness is justice. The jury took 3 hours to convict on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 25 years for attempted murder, 15 for aggravated assault causing permanent disability, 10 for embezzlement. With her age, she'd likely die in prison. As they led her away, Diane turned back one more time. You'll never see another sunrise, Flora. Never see your own face again. I took that from you forever. I didn't respond. Julian squeezed my hand, and we left the courtroom together. The embezzled funds were recovered, most of them. Diane had been clever, hiding money in offshore accounts, but not clever enough. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit traced nearly $1.7 million back to my trust. The remaining $300,000 was gone, spent on luxuries Diane had denied herself for years while living in my mother's shadow. Bernard Kessler, a new estate attorney, restructured my trust with protections against future exploitation. He was appalled that Diane had been able to steal so easily. Your mother trusted her, Bernard said gently. That trust was weaponized against you. I'm so sorry. The money mattered less than the betrayal. Diane had stolen my sight for jealousy, then stolen my inheritance for greed. She'd taken everything she could from me. But she couldn't take everything. I was still here. Still alive. Still fighting. I couldn't return to concert piano. That dream died with my sight. For months, I grieved the life I'd lost. But slowly, I began to build something new. I started giving piano lessons to blind children, teaching them that music isn't about seeing keys, it's about feeling them. My first student was a 7-year-old girl named Maya who'd been born blind. "You understand," she told me after her first lesson. "Other teachers feel sorry for me. But you just teach me music." I found purpose in that. In showing blind children that their disability didn't define their potential. I also began speaking about my experience. First at support groups for crime victims. Then at larger venues. Sharing my story of betrayal and survival. People responded. They sent letters, emails, messages. Other victims of betrayal by trusted people. They found hope in my story. 2 years after losing my sight, I founded Seeing Clearly, a non-profit supporting victims of crimes committed by trusted individuals. We provided legal aid, therapy, support groups, and advocacy. We helped people who'd been betrayed by family members, friends, caregivers, partners. The foundation grew quickly. Donations poured in. Volunteers stepped up. We helped hundreds of people in the first year alone. Julian left his journalism career to run operations. Dr. Grant joined our medical advisory board. Detective Walsh helped train our legal advocates. The community center, built with part of my recovered trust money, became a haven for people rebuilding their lives after betrayal. And I found myself healing in the process of helping others heal. Diane had tried to destroy me. Instead, she transformed me into something stronger. 3 years after losing my sight, I wrote a book, Blind Trust, a memoir of betrayal and survival. I dictated it using voice-to-text software, with Julian editing. It took 18 months to complete. The book told everything: my mother's toxic friendship with Diane, the 30 years of suppressed jealousy, the night I lost my sight, the investigation, the trial and the aftermath. I wrote about Ethan leaving me. About the loneliness of those first months. About learning to navigate darkness. About the moment I discovered Diane's betrayal. But I also wrote about finding strength. About building a new life. About discovering that blindness revealed truths sight had hidden. The book became a bestseller within weeks. It struck a chord, the horror of being betrayed by someone you loved and trusted completely. Publishers Weekly called it devastating and ultimately triumphant. The New York Times praised its unflinching honesty about disability and betrayal. But the reviews that mattered most came from readers who'd experienced similar betrayals. They wrote to tell me the book helped them understand they weren't alone. People constantly asked if I'd forgiven Diane. Interviewers posed it delicately: "Have you found peace with what happened?" Support group members asked more directly: "How do you let go of that much hatred?" Strangers assumed forgiveness was the endpoint: "You must have forgiven her to move forward like this." But the truth was more complicated. I didn't forgive Diane. Not because I was consumed by hatred, I wasn't. But because forgiveness requires the offender to show remorse, to acknowledge harm, to attempt repair. Diane showed none of that. Even in prison, she remained convinced she'd been justified. Letters she wrote to the parole board called her actions understandable given the circumstances. So no, I didn't forgive her. But I did release her. I stopped letting her actions define my present. I stopped giving her power over my emotions. That wasn't forgiveness. That was freedom. And it was enough. I never visited Diane in prison. But Julian did, twice. The first time was 1 year into her sentence. He wanted to understand her mindset, to see if any remorse had developed. "She's completely unrepentant," Julian reported. She spent an hour justifying her actions. Explaining how Mom and Flora had everything while she had nothing. How she was the real victim. The second visit came 3 years into her sentence. Julian had heard through the prison chaplain that Diane wanted to see family. "She's changed," the chaplain said. "Prison has been hard on her. I think she's ready to acknowledge what she did." But when Julian visited, Diane spent the time complaining about prison conditions and asking for money for commissary. She never mentioned me except to say, "I hope Flora's learned some humility." Julian never went back. Some people never change. Some people stay trapped in their own resentment forever. Diane was one of them. 4 years after losing my sight, I gave a TED Talk titled What Blindness Taught Me About Seeing. Standing on that stage, facing an audience I couldn't see, I told my story. For 24 years, I could see everything except what mattered most, the truth about people around me. I saw beauty, talent, success. But I was blind to jealousy, resentment, hatred. Then Diane Winters, my godmother, took my sight to punish me for sins I didn't commit. For being born to the woman she envied. For having the life she believed should have been hers. She made me blind out of jealousy. But she didn't know what I could still see. In darkness, I learned to see people's true nature. Not through appearance or words, but through actions, voices, the way they showed up when I needed them. I learned to see my brother's love in how he held my hand when I was terrified. I learned to see Dr. Grant's compassion in his gentle voice delivering devastating news. I learned to see Diane's cruelty in her laughter and false sympathy. Diane thought she was taking everything. But she actually stripped away everything superficial and forced me to see what really mattered. She's in prison now, blind to her own darkness in ways she'll never escape. And I'm free, free from trusting blindly, free from who I was, free from a life built on seeing but not truly seeing. I lost my sight. But I gained the ability to see clearly. The audience erupted in applause. I smiled toward the sound, my face serene. The talk went viral. 20 million views in the first month. It became one of TED's most watched talks ever. 5 years after losing my sight, I had built a life I never imagined. The foundation was thriving, helping thousands of betrayal victims annually. My book was taught in criminal justice and psychology courses. I gave talks internationally about trauma, recovery, and resilience. I'd learned Braille, mastered screen readers, could navigate the city independently with my guide dog Luna. I'd started dating again, a poet named Alexander who was also blind. He understood what Ethan couldn't, that disability doesn't diminish worth. I'd reconnected with music, though differently now. I composed instead of performing, creating pieces that explored sound and silence, light and darkness. My relationship with Julian had deepened. We'd become not just siblings but true partners in healing and advocacy. I'd become someone I respected. Someone stronger than the sighted Flora ever was. Diane had meant to destroy me. Instead, she'd forged me into something unbreakable. 6 years after my blinding, I received a letter from prison. From Diane. Julian read it to me. It was long, rambling, full of self-pity. Prison is hell. I'm old and sick and surrounded by criminals. This isn't what I deserved. I made one mistake, one moment of weakness after 30 years of being overlooked and underappreciated. Helena had everything while I struggled. You had everything while I faded. Was I supposed to just accept that? Was I supposed to smile and celebrate while you shined and I disappeared? I did what I had to do. I won't apologize for trying to level an unfair playing field. Maybe someday you'll understand that. The letter went on, but the theme never changed. Diane was the victim. Her actions were justified. She'd been driven to desperation by unfair circumstances. There was no remorse. No acknowledgement of harm. No understanding that she'd destroyed an innocent person out of her own bitterness. Do you want to respond? Julian asked. I thought about it. Thought about all the things I could say. About how her jealousy was her choice. How she'd wasted 30 years resenting my mother instead of building her own life. How she'd destroyed me for having the audacity to exist. But what was the point? Diane would never understand. She'd die in prison still convinced she'd been the wronged party. No, I said. She's already taken enough from me. She doesn't get any more of my time. Julian burned the letter. We never spoke of it again. 7 years after losing my sight, I attended the opening of the Helena Ashford Memorial Wing at the hospital where Mom had worked. Julian described it to me, light-filled spaces, cutting-edge cardiac equipment, photos of Mom saving lives. Her legacy, preserved and honored. During the ceremony, the hospital director asked me to speak. I stood before a crowd I couldn't see and talked about my mother. About her brilliance, her dedication, her love. About the legacy she'd left, not just in medicine, but in teaching me resilience. My mother survived my father leaving, I said. She built a career and raised 2 children alone. She taught me that strength isn't avoiding hardship, it's enduring it and emerging transformed. When Diane Winters took my sight 7 years ago, she thought she was taking my future. But she couldn't take what my mother had already given me, the knowledge that I was more than what I could see or do. That my worth wasn't dependent on sight or success or other people's approval. Mom taught me to see myself clearly. And in the darkness Diane created, I finally learned that lesson. I'll never see another sunrise. Never see my own face again. Those losses are real, and some days they still hurt. But I can see what matters now. I can see truth through lies. Love through betrayal. Strength through suffering. Diane is in prison, but she's still blind to her own role in her misery. Still unable to see that her jealousy was a choice, that her bitterness was self-inflicted. And I'm free. Not because I forgave her, I haven't. But because I stopped letting her actions define me. I took what she meant as destruction and used it as foundation. Built something stronger than what existed before. That's what my mother would have wanted. Not revenge or bitterness, but transformation. Taking the worst thing that ever happened and making it matter for good. So thank you, Mom, for teaching me to see clearly. Even in darkness. Especially in darkness. After the ceremony, Julian walked me outside. Mom would be so proud of you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know, I said. And I did. Somewhere, in a prison cell, Diane was living with her choices. Still resentful. Still bitter. Still convinced the world had wronged her. And I was here. Living with mine. Building, helping, healing. She'd made me blind out of jealousy. But she'd never understood what I could still see, that the only prison that matters is the one we build inside ourselves. That true freedom comes from releasing resentment, not nurturing it. That strength is measured not by what we keep, but by what we rebuild after everything is taken. I lost my sight. But I gained clarity. And in the end, that was the greater gift.